What if I told you that the answer to this question is that a Japanese major and a Sikh preacher were the two founders of the Indian National Army, an army made up mostly of Indian prisoners of war who switched sides to fight Britain in World War II to gain independence for India? Hi, I'm Vijay Balan, and welcome to episode 2 of Little Known Histories, where I unpack some of the context behind my book, The Swaraj Spy. You know, Britain and Japan are alike in many ways. They're both resource starved island states hanging at the edge of a big landmass. Now, back in the politics of a few centuries ago, what did you do if you didn't have resources? Well, you just went and grabbed it from someone else. It's just that the European empires had a few centuries head start. Now, in a quest for an empire of its own in Asia, Japan had to displace the British, the French, and the Dutch empires existent in that region. And they also had to make sure that the Americans wouldn't come to the aid of these European empires. Now, in order to get rid of the British, this man, Major Iwaichi Fujiwara, a Japanese intelligence officer, and a man who believed that Asia was for Asians and that countries like India deserved freedom from colonial rule, had an interesting idea. Why not get the thousands of Indian troops, a number that eventually added up to 2.5 million, that were fighting for the British to switch sides? He managed to convince his higher ups to give it a try. Now imagine this, a relatively junior officer, a major, convincing the Imperial Japanese High Command to try something that outlandish. Anyway, Fujiwara ends up in Bangkok, Siam as Thailand was called back then, just before Japan formally entered the war with the attack on Pearl Harbor. Now, Bangkok had a large number of Indian freedom fighters who had fled India because of their activities. In Bangkok, Fujiwara visited this place, the Thai Bharat Cultural Lodge, an institution that exists to this day. That's a fairly recent picture. There he meets this man, Gyani Pritam Singh Dhillon, a Sikh preacher with the Singh Sabha and also an intense nationalist. Now, in Pritam Singh, Fujiwara finds not only a fierce revolutionary, but he finds a man who understood that previous attempts to get Indian soldiers trained by Britain to rise up against their colonial masters had failed because of the lack of external support. So the two men decide that the time is right to try again, given Japan's imminent entry into the war. Now, let me ask you this. At the same time Japan bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, they bombed one other place. Where do you think that was? It was Singapore. So while they were bombing Pearl Harbor, they bombed Singapore and landed an invasion force in northern Malaya. Pritam Singh and Fujiwara and 14 others landed as a team along with that invasion force. Now, most of the troops fighting for the British against the Japanese in Malaya were from India and Australia. As the Japanese rapidly outflanked and defeated these troops, Pritam Singh asked the surrendering Indians this one question: why are you fighting for the British who use you to hold India as a colony? Why didn't you join us and fight against them to gain independence for India? It was Pritam Singh's passion and persuasion that convinced this man, Captain Mohan Singh of the 1 by 14 Punjab Regiment and a fellow Sikh, to agree to lead the Indian National Army. And as the Japanese forged down Malaya towards Singapore, many more joined, mainly because of Pritam Singh's persuasion and Fujiwara's sincerity. The story of the dramatic formal birth of the Indian National Army in Singapore is the subject of my next episode. Thank you so much for watching.